Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Tonight, we're going to be talking about shadow work. This is something that I see more and more about written in mainstream society. So I want to simplify it and talk about it. And really, for me, this is such a profound way to think about our own mental health and healing through the idea, the concept of the shadow. Before I get into that, let me talk about upcoming announcements and events in our programming. March 14th through 16th is an online Finding You program. That is a 2.5 day, half the time as the in-person Finding You, about a third of the cost. So if time and money are at a premium for you, the online version is a wonderful option. March 19th through 23rd, we still have one spot available for that intensive. That is one that I am running. I run a couple of these years. So if you're interested in working with me at our flagship program, Finding You, March 19th is that opportunity. April 23rd is the next iteration of Finding You after that. And upcoming next week, we have the attachment-based therapy masterclass that I'm teaching. That provides 6 continuing education credits for those of you who need that for your professional work. That's March 7th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Time. And my next offering for the Conscious Parenting Workshop, April 11th, 9 to 4 Mountain Time. Michelle and I will be working the Finding Connection workshop. This is for couples. It's kind of like Finding You for couples. It's not really appropriate for high conflict couples, but if you're feeling lost, if you're looking for greater intimacy and connection and understanding the roles that you are operating within your marriage, the Finding Connection workshop is an opportunity for that, and I'll be running that with my wife, Michelle. For all inquiries, if you want to find out about our private intensives, if you want to register with any of the programming that I mentioned today, or if you want to just make suggestions or say hi, anything for Finding You, you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. That's info@findingyouprograms.com. I just finished participating in my own intensive this last week, somewhere around the 13th time that I've done this. I have a group of men that I go back to every year. And something that really crystallized for me is this idea of this first slide. I do my work, and this is how I show the people that I love them. That is my gift. That's the way that I say I love you to the people that are in my life, the people that I care about. I do it because it's my job to take responsibility for the stuff that comes up for me, the stuff that I'm likely to project onto other people and see in other people. I do it so I can carry around with me, and I'll talk about this as we go tonight. I do the work so I can carry around my own shadow, my own darkness, my own badness, if you will, so that I don't project it. I don't make the people in my life the problem. I carry my own darkness so that my children and those that I love don't have to carry it. So let's get into what that means. I love the fact that this is not a new idea, this idea of knowing yourself, finding you. From the Gospel of St. Thomas, those of you who might not be familiar with what that is from the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in a cave in the late 1940s. Some of them were intact, and one of them is believed to be the Gospel of St. Thomas. And it sounds a lot more like, if you read it sounds a lot more like Buddhism and Eastern philosophy than the Christian scriptures that we have today. Regardless, the quote that I love from the Gospel of St. Thomas reads, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." So it is this idea that is not new. This idea that I've shared with you before, that the summary of all the prophets and what they have to say is to get ourselves a mirror, to understand what's going on. The problem with that, the challenge or the difficulty with that, is that we find things inside of ourselves that we have been taught are wrong, are bad, are unacceptable, that should not be there. We should be different than we are. And so looking at yourself is a very disagreeable practice because of what you find. Also, from the Egyptian book of the dead, it is written, "The kingdom of heaven is within oneself, and the person who knows himself shall find it." It is this idea that Joseph Campbell talks about, that all the devils, all the angels, all the gods, all the goddesses are in here, are found inside of us. And for me, the application of that principle is the fact that Our unhappiness, our lack of contentment in this life, our lack of peace, our lack of joy, our lack of meaning is fundamentally our responsibility. It is, those aspects of us are the result of things that happen to us. And that makes them a worthy subject for our study, to look at what happened to you, to understand, to tell the story again, to unravel it over and over again until you see what happened to you and see how that shaped and formed you. But we do that work, that historical work, not to get stuck, not to get into a victim mentality, but to move through it. We do it to own it, to take responsibility, and we do it so that we shift from the position of our wounds and our traumas and our stories having us, and us having our stories and our wounds and our traumas. We do it for freedom. We do it to free ourselves up from it. A lot of what I talk about tonight can be found or understood. There's a wonderful book that I read. One of my 5 favorite books that has impacted me in my life is a book that is a series of essays edited by Connie Zweig and Jeremiah Abrams called Meeting the Shadow: The Hidden Power of the Dark Side of Human Nature. See, the challenge that happens in our life is when there are aspects of ourselves which the people around us, the culture, our parents, our caregivers, our schoolmates, our teachers, the things that they find unacceptable, unappealing, disgusting, bad, wrong, those are the parts of ourselves that we bury, that we hide, that we split off, that we reject. Now, they don't go away. They don't disappear. They just go into some kind of deep unconscious part of us, some closet within our psyche. The problem with that is attached to all of those aspects of self are often our greatest gifts. That is why when you watch stories, inevitably, invariably, you'll see stories out there where the protagonist of the story believes something about themselves is fundamentally flawed, and so they deny that. They quiet that voice. They dismiss it, or like I said, split it off. And it is only through the work and the story and the arc that they learn to reclaim that aspect of themselves. And what they find is that it emboldens them with creativity, with light, with power, with really oftentimes a healing aspect, a healing characteristic that they can offer to the society at large. That is the story. That is the arc of shadow work. We find that certain parts of ourselves, certain ways of being, behaving, certain characteristics of us are threatening. They're threatening because when we display them, when we embody them, the caregivers, the people that we rely on for life and for safety, find them to be absolutely unappealing, disgusting, unwanted. So the threat of those aspects is that if we continue to own those things, to live that way, that we might lose our caregivers. We might lose our belonging in the group. And that is too threatening. That is too dangerous. So we willingly push those parts of ourselves inside of us. And then later on, it is only through, oftentimes it happens at midlife, oftentimes it happens in a crisis, oftentimes it happens when we experience the utter futility of hiding from who we are. We take back those aspects of the self, the parts of ourselves that we have been taught are evil and bad and wrong, the dark side. Even the word shadow has the image of darkness, right? The idea of darkness with it. We take those parts back to ourselves. We begin to live them, and in the light, we see that it is our great gifts. And then we bless the world. We bless the people around us. Let's start off in defining the shadow with the idea of ego and soul in psychology. In psychology, these are the two elements of ourselves that stand in opposition to each other. Ego is that part of us that wants to be good, that needs to be good, that must be good. And the ego's job is to take the urges, the things that we want to do, our natural inclinations, and to find an outlet or an expression that is acceptable to others. And when we can't find it, that's when the ego then shoves that aspect of the self into the closet, into the corners of our psyche. And we imagine, we experience them as not existing anymore. So the ego is that conscious part of us that is making, at least we think it is, making the decisions. It's kind of the manager. The soul, in in the psychological sense, is not a spirit. It's not the idea that religions often talk about, where it's this ghost inside of the machine. The soul is the authentic self, the totality, the whole, the complete, the real self. And so these two are in oppositions, because the soul is who we are and the ego is the manager, deciding what is acceptable and how it can be expressed. So then we go to the next stage of explanation. We talk about ego and the defense. To understand it very simply, a defense is something some energy that we put up to protect ourselves against a threat. I often ask the question when I'm teaching this, what's the difference between an explanation, which is a neutral term in this sense, and justification, which in this sense is a defense mechanism, a behavior that is defensive. What's the difference between justification and an explanation? And I often listen to many answers. And what I come to explain is that an explanation is neutral. And a justification, the thing that distinguishes it from from an explanation, is a justification is a response to a threat. Denial, rationalization, intellectualization. There are a host of them, of defenses. And in all of them, there is a feeling of threat. So what is the threat? What is the defense against? What are we protecting? We're protecting against the idea that we're not good, we're not lovable, we're not worthwhile, we're not worthy of belonging. We have no value. And because we are Homo sapiens, and we have this history of knowing that our only, in a genetic sense, in our DNA, it is written that if we don't find a group to belong to, that we won't survive, that we won't die. So all of the sapiens that didn't have that characteristic of gravitating toward group and belonging, all of them died from an evolutionary perspective and didn't pass on their genes. So what's alive today are the people that group together. That's where it comes from an evolutionary perspective. We want to be good because good is what allows us to fit into the group, and fitting into the group means that we can literally survive. And so that's what the defense is against, is I don't want to be bad. I can't accept the possibility that there's an aspect, a characteristic of who I am that would threaten my very existence, my very life. A great explanation of the shadow is illustrated in a drawing that Joseph Campbell once drew to teach about this. He drew a circle. For those of you that are listening, I'll do my best to describe it. It's here on the screen for those of you that are watching live. He drew a circle. And about 2/3 of the way up the circle, he drew a line from one edge of the circle to the other. So if you can imagine a circle with a line through it, not in the middle, but about 2/3 of the way up. And that bottom 2/3 of the circle, the space inside that circle, is the unconscious. Above the line is our conscious self, representing that most of us, borrowing from the analogy of the iceberg, most of us is underwater. Most of us is unconscious. Most of who we are, we're not aware of. And he drew a circle in the middle of the circle, a dot in the middle of the circle. And he said, this is the center of consciousness, the center of who we are. And he drew a little square in the top third of the circle. And he said, this is who we think we are. This is our ego, our consciousness, the center of our consciousness. That's who we think we are. But really who we are encompasses a large majority of material that is outside of our conscious awareness. So the goal in psychotherapy, the goal in shadow work, is to move that line, farther and farther down in the circle, so we become more conscious. We become more aware. We know who we are. And I will say, the experience of knowing yourself is a sublime experience. It is so profoundly healing to make peace with who you are, to learn to love your horrible, rotten self. It is so overwhelmingly beautiful that Joseph Campbell talked about the fact that prophets and poets called it heaven. And as we look with the Book of the Dead that I read and the scripture, the paragraph from the Gospel of St. Thomas, we see that idea long before we had the science and the understanding of psychology that we have today. So what is the shadow? Like I mentioned, number one, we split off parts of ourselves that threaten our connection to others. Principally, we were thinking about our caregivers. Later on, it's our peers, it's our schoolmates, it's our teachers, it's society. We split off the parts of ourselves that threatened our connection to others. Number two, those unowned parts, split off parts of us, then seek food and light. They seek expression by manifesting themselves through the patterns. These patterns could be considered our trauma responses, our symptoms, or our mental illness. They often manifest themselves in very exaggerated, very mutated forms. An addiction to alcohol, for example, rage and anger, depression. All of these are manifestations of the unlived life of the individual, the untold story that is inside the individual, the unexpressed, the unrecognized parts of the self. Number three, these parts, these split off parts or aspects of ourselves aren't inherently evil, although they are often referred to as evil or dark or shadow elements. They aren't inherently evil, although when they are repressed, when they are shoved into the closet, their manifestation takes on distorted forms, like I mentioned, addictions, violence towards self or others, etc. Number four, these parts, these disowned, split off parts, hold power, wisdom, and creative energy. That's why the book that I mentioned earlier, Meeting the Shadow, the subtitle of it is The Hidden Power of the Dark Side of Human Nature. That's why artists are often so honest and raw, not always aware of what they're expressing, but they allow that unconscious material to come up and it gets expressed through their art. It kind of gets expressed through metaphor and symbolism. So you listen to a great song, you look at a great piece of art, you experience something that an artist created, and it touches a part of you that can't be quite expressed with words. That's the power of the dark side. That's the power of the shadow. When these parts are reclaimed, it is said that we have expanded. We have become larger. Number five, reclaiming these parts can be scary, painful, disorienting, and temporarily, cause chaos in our lives. Midlife crisis, right? An emotional breakdown. These are all, from this perspective, a spiritual awakening. But it's messy at first because these parts that haven't had expression, that we haven't practiced embodying, come out in crazy ways, in exaggerated forms, in distorted ways. And number six, as we integrate and come to realize that there is nothing bad about them or us, we can use the energy that we've been using to keep them buried, to keep them repressed, toward loving the larger community. We have greater access to love. In fact, our love is largely, our ability to love or show it in the world is largely a measure of how much we've reclaimed our shadow, those parts of ourselves. This is where creativity, vulnerability, this is our soul's desire. This is the song, the music that we have to sing in this life. How does one recognize the shadow? Well, humor, what you laugh at, stories, metaphors, parables, analogies. What kind of stories do you gravitate toward? I love, I've always loved superhero. I've always loved Superman among the many superheroes because it's that part of me, right? It's that part of all of us that is seeking expression. Superman is one of my favorites because it has such great symbolism. Superman's home planet, mother, if you will, was destroyed. In fact, the only thing that threatens Superman is a visit from his mother, metaphorically through kryptonite, where he gets reduced to something below human. But away from his mother, away from his family of origin, away from home, he can leap tall buildings, right? Bullets don't go into him. He's faster than a locomotive, as they say. And that feeling that we have when we watch a superhero movie or any movie with any protagonist, any hero, is because it touches an aspect of ourselves, part of ourselves. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a classic example of the shadow. Through experimentation, Dr. Jekyll takes a potion and becomes this monstrous soul, but it's the same person. The medicine that he takes automatically gives expression to the dark, unconsidered, split off part of himself. And Mr. Hyde becomes a monster, a ravenous monster. What are your particular excesses, your addictions, your perversions? And I don't mean sexual perversions, that's what that word, but what do you do in the world to excess? What do you do that doesn't quite fit and quite measure up? That's where our shadow elements can be found. We can begin to understand ourselves better. Understanding our projections. Who do we hate? Who do we judge? Who do we not like? Who can't we be patient with? That is a really good signal of our shadow. Like Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better standing of ourselves. That is almost universally the truth. One of the best ways to understand your shadow is, who do you vilify? Who is what group of people, what characteristic in another person is the thing that sets you off the most? That is where your work is. That's where your integration is. Our relationships to other people are where we become exposed to this, right? And where we can heal. When we marry somebody, we marry in large part a projection. It's a positive projection. We project positive parts too. Parts that we are afraid to own for fear that we will be thought to be arrogant or narcissistic. So we deny our gifts and our light too, and we project those out until you meet a celebrity, right? You meet a hero of yours. And if that celebrity, that hero, that person on a pedestal, whatever it is, maybe it's a financial leader, maybe it's a writer. If you met that person and you were starstruck by them, and they had the wherewithal to speak what I'm talking about today, they would simply say, the thing that you see in me that you admire is in you. I found that out with my therapist. The thing that I love, that I admire the most about her, is the parts of me that are unexpressed and unrealized. That's a really important idea. It changes our relationship. It's why famous people and heroes don't like to be heroes in a lot of ways. It's too much pressure. They can't live up to the projections of the masses. Impulsive or inadvertent acts, like, oops, I didn't mean to do that, those can be signals for your shadow. Freudian slips is often what we would refer to those kinds of acts as. Seemingly accidental, random statements or moments or behaviors that might give. There's an old saying that I saw, a meme that I saw that I loved for a long time, that said, I'm sorry I was late, I didn't want to come. That's a humorous way of talking about this seemingly random thing outside of our control that might speak to a part of ourselves that we're not seeing and giving voice to. Feedback from others, negative feedback from others, can be something that helps to reveal our wounds, our traumas. Somebody saying, this is the third time that you haven't called me when you were late. That can tell us something about ourselves. See, our body keeps the score and our body knows. And so what our conscious mind thinks that we believe and feel and want to do, it's not quite running the show as much as we would imagine that it is. We will end up forgetting and resisting appointments or meetings or tasks where there is undone work. Our shame, our exaggerated judgments about others and their faults, boy, he really let his weight get out of control. That is part of our shadow side. That tells us something, that there is something for us to look at there. What are our issues around appearance and weight and food and desire and getting our needs met? When the shadow takes over, if it's not attended to, it can really run the entire show. And what that looks like is compulsions, addictions, identifications, exaggerated behaviors, impulsiveness. We become not the master of our own lives. We become out of control, hurtful, harmful, hard to get along with, blaming others. Sometimes our vehement denials or reactiveness to other things. There's a saying from Al-Anon that says, if it's hysterical, it's historical. If you have a reaction to something that logically could be seen as reasonably moderately sized, and you have a bigger reaction than that, that can be a sign of something unconscious. Carl Jung said, whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. If the world seems unfair to you, if the world is out to get you, at an exaggerated level, it becomes paranoia. Under a great deal of stress, people imagine that literally everybody and everything in the world is out to get them and is looking to harm them. That is the extreme example of having a very large shadow that is not explored. We look for and find in other people's behaviors and what they say and do to us as evidence that they are the enemy. A lot of these are going to be from Carl Jung. This one also. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, he said, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. When people talk about light, I always cringe just a little bit about embracing your light, because I know that the real strength, the real power, the real healing, the real wisdom, the real creativity, the magic is in those parts of myself that I relegated to the unconscious to fit in to the group. And it's taken me decades to take those back, to realize those, to embody those. Carl Jung wrote, the acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. That I feed the hungry, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy. All of these are undoubtedly great virtues. But what if I should discover that the least among them all, the poorest of all the beggars, the most imprudent of all the offenders, the very enemy of himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness? What if it is that I myself am the enemy who must be loved? What then? And this is really what this Finding You podcast is all about. It's about realizing and having compassion toward all the parts of yourself. The reason that I tell so many stories about how much I screw up every single thing that I teach is to let you know that there's no judgment, that it's safe, that we all struggle, that the person who tells the stories constantly of all of their successes has an expansive shadow. But the fact of the matter is that we all struggle with virtually everything that I teach all the time. A good friend of mine was asked by a younger parent, how do you, upon observing my friend and seeing what a good father he seemed to be, for lack of a better word, good, he was asked, how do you stop from screwing up as a father? And my wise friend said, you don't. He said, I screw up all the time, every day, so much more than you would imagine. I fall, I stumble, I come back and apologize, and I try again. And in the end, I just don't leave. I don't give up. I just keep going. We're going to hurt the people that we love the most. I've never seen an exception to that, really. We hurt the people that we are closest to. So the question really becomes, is it worth it to keep going? Is it worth it to stay in a relationship? Is that person working on taking responsibility for their own life? And are we doing the same? Carl Jung said, by not being aware of having a shadow, that's really an important phrase. By not being aware of having a shadow, you declare a part of your personality to be non-existent. Then it enters the kingdom of the non-existent, which swells up and takes on enormous proportions. The more denied, the more repressed, the more unconscious is, the more powerful it looms over all of your life. If you get rid of qualities you don't like by denying them, you become more and more unaware of what you are. You declare yourself more and more non-existent, and your devils will grow fatter and fatter. In psychotherapy, it's important for us as clients to realize that there is something unconscious going on. If therapy were all about the conscious mind, about problem solving and skill building and tools, if it were just about the conscious mind, it would be easy and anybody could do it. You could do it with a workbook. But psychotherapy, analytically informed psychotherapy, the kind that we do at Finding You, that understands attachment and all of its layers and levels and presentations, is about understanding what is unconscious and buried. Experiences, feelings, beliefs. Like I said, Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You will think that what is happening to you. In working with parents and children who are struggling with mental illness for many, many years, that's really where I got my start in this profession. The principal story that parents bring is, here is my child. Here is the reason for my unhappiness. Fix my child so that I can be happy and sleep at night and be joyful. And what they don't realize is that their happiness, their joy or lack of it, is their responsibility. Their unhappiness is their responsibility. That the task is to learn to be responsible for, take responsibility, and work toward finding that joy. And then amazingly, that energy, that project ripples out from you, starts to affect your child differently. You start to think about your child. You stop doing to your child what was done to you. One of my favorite quotes early on in my experience of reading Jung was, I would rather be whole than good, he said. What does that mean? I would rather be whole than good. What he means is I would rather know all of myself, the bad, the shadowy parts, which aren't really bad. Well, in the subtitle of my book, Learn the Audacity to Be You, Learning to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self, it's not really a horrible, rotten self. It's not really bad or evil. It's not our demons or our devils. Those are, again, charged words and terms that have been used to frighten us, to control us. And somebody who is working toward and accomplishing some level of wholeness is more kind and loving, more free, more patient, more generous. We become whole. We do this work by going to therapy, of course, and not just any therapy, but the kind of therapy that we talk about here, the kind of therapy where the task is not to become better or gooder, not to improve, but to become who you are, which is going to be messy at first. It's not to fix you. It's to see you. It's not to improve you. It's to love you. Group work, that's why I really like our Finding You Intensive, because the group work, and I just participate, like I said, in my own. Watching other people do their work is as instructive or more so than my own work. Right now, as I think about it, the lessons that I came away with my 4-day intensive that I just did, the lessons that really come to mind are the ones that I learned while I was watching somebody else do their work. Group work can be very powerful. Body work, somatic work. We have a lot of energy, of trauma, of wisdom stored in our body, outside of our conscious mind. And getting to know and be in relationship with your bodies, with your aches, your pains, where do you feel sadness? Where do you feel fear? Where do you carry stress? Doing body work can help you become more aware, more conscious. Mindfulness, a focus, a practice. Therapy, in my way of thinking, is a mindfulness practice, is a meditation. When the therapist says, "How do you feel? How was that for you? Tell me about your week. Tell me what's going on. What was that like?" That is asking the participant in therapy to know themselves, to look, to be the observer. Mythology is a wonderful way of understanding our shadow parts. Mythology, I'm going to skip down to dreams. Dreams are a personal myth, and mythology are a shared dream. So your psyche at night runs through the energy, puts on a show for you, gives you a personal myth. And the more you learn to know yourself, the more your dreams will make sense to you. The more you understand the themes and the motifs. What is the myth? What are the myths? What are the mythological figures that you're attracted to? That will tell you something about yourself. Joseph Campbell suggested, and Jung would agree, that mythology is this shared consciousness by a group at a specific time, and that they transcend the individual. They transcend the Greek myths that we have. It's not that the Greeks were so stupid that they thought that Zeus and Apollo and those were real, and that now because we are so wise, we can see that they're not. The fact of the matter is that was the way for them describing the energies in the individuals. And the fact is today, more so, we are so primitive and unenlightened that we dismiss those out of hand because they aren't literally true. Sigmund Freud said that all religions are true in one way or another. Campbell said it also. It is telling us about the human experience, about what it means to be a person. Psychedelics can be a wonderful way. Sometimes psychedelics aren't pleasant. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's upsetting and haunting. But that's not a bad thing. If you have a bad trip, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That might tell you about some part of yourself that you're afraid of incorporating. In your dreams, when you have a scary dream, a nightmare, those aren't evil energies. They are psychological constructs, things that you've been taught to be afraid of. If you could wake in your dream, if you could have a lucid dream and talk to the witch or the goblin or the monster, the devil, the demon in your dream, the bear, the home invader, whatever, if you could talk to them and sit down with them in your dream, you could understand what they're trying to teach you. What part of yourself, lost and buried, represents that you've been told to be afraid of. See, you've been told to be afraid of this stuff. That's how you were controlled. That's how I was controlled. Humor, like I mentioned, art, poetry, music. Perhaps the best way to understand your shadow is get married and have children. These institutions, the institution of marriage, and raising a family, these teach us more about ourselves. These are not venues for us to spread our great wisdom, at least not initially. They are here to teach us, and they will expose our emotional immaturity, our unhealed parts. They will expose our unconsciousness. My therapist said some time ago to me, she said during a session when I had confessed making a mistake for the umpteenth time, she said, that's the thing about psychotherapy. The news just gets worse and worse. And we laughed. That idea, the news just gets, is that I am seeing myself more and more. And that's painful. There is no coming to consciousness without pain and discomfort. It will be fundamentally unpleasant because you're seeing parts of yourself that you've imagined don't exist, that you buried a long time ago, that you have projected out into the world onto others and called them evil or bad or wrong. A Jungian analyst once wrote, until the shadow is integrated into the personality, the world appears filled with opponents or adversaries who are actually products of the unconscious. Afterward, people can be seen as individuals, even people who disagree with us. And the great teacher Adyashanti said, anything you avoid in life will come back over and over again until you're willing to face it, to look deeply into its true nature. And of course, from the original OG, Sigmund Freud, he said, a thing which has not been understood inevitably reappears. Like an unlaid ghost, it cannot rest until the mystery has been resolved and the spell broken. You will find yourself in compulsive, repetitive, harmful patterns until you listen to yourself, until you find and tell the untold story inside of you. We ask ourselves, what is it that our soul is asking of us? And what is it that I'm asking of other people in my life, specifically my children and my spouse? What am I asking of the other? James Hollis asked the question that I ought to be doing myself. That is the work. Thich Nhat Hanh once wrote, continue practicing until you see yourself in the most cruel and inhumane political leader, in the most devastatingly tortured prisoner, in the wealthiest man, and in the child starving, all skin and bones. Practice until you recognize your presence in everyone else, on the bus, in the subway, in the concentration camp, working in the fields, in a leaf, in a caterpillar, in a dewdrop, in a ray of sunshine. Meditate until you see yourself in a speck of dust and in the most distant galaxy. That is what it means in Buddhism, where it talks about, in Eastern philosophy, where it talks about this idea that there is no self. Once you find yourself and see yourself, you see the universe. You realize that you're not separate from other people, that you're all connected, that you're all the same. And I share this quote very often, but I'll share it again today from Charles Bukowski. Don't fight your demons. Your demons are here to teach you lessons. Sit down with your demons and have a drink and chat and learn their names and talk about the burns on their fingers and the scratches on their ankles. Some of them are very nice. In summary, become conscious. Everything else will fall into place. To become conscious, though, you first must learn to love yourself, to show compassion toward that which you have been taught to hate and despise, to the parts of you that people in your history found unacceptable. Carl Jung taught that nothing can be transformed. Think about this in therapy. Think about this in your life. Nothing, he said emphatically, can be transformed until it's accepted. That includes our complexes, our reality, and ourselves. So your mental illness is not here to bother you or pester you, and it's definitely not here to get fixed. It's here because it's your soul trying to reach you, trying to speak to you in a way that you can hear it, in a way that gets your attention. From James Hollis, the Eden book, The Eden Project, he wrote, all projection, right? Seeing ourselves out in the world. All projection occurs unconsciously. For the moment one observed, I have made a projection, one is already in the process of taking it back. More commonly, we only begin to reclaim our purchase on consciousness when the others in our lives fail to catch hold or reflect our projections. If there is one essential law of the psyche, it is that what is unconscious will be projected. That is why you observe that quote where an inner situation, if it is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. But since the psychic consists of a multiple of split off shards of energy, complex in its archetypal forms, virtually all of which are unconscious, there's always ample opportunity for projection. And as I can never know the unconscious by definition or practice, so I can never know all of the energies that are acting. This is the work. This is the lifelong work. This is the way that you show the people that you love them, is by taking it back, by not making them the enemy or the problem or the solution, which may be just as great of a burden as any other projection. Robert Johnson, an analyst, wrote, if you wish to give your children the best possible gift, the best possible entry into life, remove your shadow from them. To give them a clean heritage, psychologically speaking, is the greatest legacy. That is the gift. That is why we do what we do. I've shared that my therapist for many years in one of her offices that she was in had a poster that I found later on that she had drawn. It had a list of words with some other symbols on it. And the words read, and I'll read just part of them: drop out, fail, quit, lose, relax, give in, flunk, let go, empty, surrender, wait, give over, mellow out, slow down, don't, forget, submit, fade away, relinquish, withdraw, flop, yield, back out, acquiesce, sink, capitulate, flag, drop the ball. And the list goes on. And it's hard to see the way that it was created, this image, but this list of words she titled Words of Higher Enlightenment. That is us seeing these parts of ourselves. And when you see those parts in yourself, it's because you've developed self-compassion. And because you have self-compassion for those parts in yourself, you have compassion and love for everybody else. Your ability to love is a measure of self-love. Your ability to be kind and compassionate is a measure of how much you love yourself and how much you know yourself. Adyashanti said, enlightenment is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. And the great teacher Alan Watts taught, when you find out that there was never anything in the dark side to be afraid of, nothing is left but love. You can't really love if you can't reclaim the bad and the evil in you. It's only when you accept and learn to love the ugly, unwanted, disgusting parts of yourself that you can really love, because otherwise every act in the name of love is likely to be serving your ego, that you want to be good. If you need to be good, it's really hard to love. But if you accept it and learn to love your own horrible, rotten self, love flows automatically. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. This work is hard. It's really hard. And what I learned again this weekend is that these ideas are really hard to teach unless you have some experience with what I'm talking about. That's part of why I try to tell the stories that I tell. Very everyday stories. Not really terrific or magical stories, but very everyday stories of my failures, so that you can see it in yourself. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls, to avoid seeing themselves. And further, Jung wrote, loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find admissible. That is the genesis of the shadow. So what are the take-homes for this broadcast this evening? First, the work is never ending. It's why I don't believe in graduating somebody from therapy. And as it stands today, I don't believe that I have any need to stop therapy. I'm continuing. In fact, I would argue that I'm learning at an accelerated rate about myself, one small humiliation after the other. Enlightenment is loving and embracing your whole self, not just the good parts. How is this done? Spend some time with somebody who can see all of you without running away, without shirking, without being disgusted, without being judgmental. Spend enough time with that person, and you'll start to see and to reclaim the parts of yourselves that you have split off. Peace, my son-in-law wrote this weekend, peace will never come to you if you're trying to be good. Because if you look deeply into yourself, he explained, you will see that there's so much more to you than just the good. That's from Jordan June, my son-in-law, and a Finding You partner and facilitator and coach. We must change our ideas about good and bad, right and wrong, and should and shouldn't. If the task, if the goal, if the aim is to be good, the shadow grows. If the task in life to teach our children is to be good people, we are participating in the creation of large shadows. Recognize the defense. Where are you defensive? See, that's the biggest barrier in relationships and intimacy, is the defense, which is just a way of describing the part of ourselves that we haven't accepted. Recently, somebody said something, gave me some really, really hard feedback. Didn't use a lot of nice words. And it didn't get in me. Because the fact of the matter is, if it's true, I need to see it. And if it's not true, then it has nothing to do with me. The defense will tell you where you feel threatened. Learn to recognize your projections, what you feel and think about other people, positive and negative. Learn to accept that you are the reason for your unhappiness. It's not your addicted child. It's not your resistant or stubborn spouse, your know-it-all spouse, your narcissistic or borderline spouse. You are the reason for your unhappiness. But that's the best news in the world, because that means that it's within your control. Happiness and peace are within your control. And the work is to see yourself, to do the arduous task, the painful task of coming to greater consciousness and awareness about yourself. And like I said, you have to have some experience with this process that I'm describing to understand it. And if you do, everything will begin to expand for you. All right, folks, my two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. March 14th is our next online program. Check it out. March 19th, the one that I'm running, has one spot left. April 23rd after that for our in-person outside of Park City, Utah. My attachment-based master class is March 7th, and the Conscious Parenting Workshop is April 11th. The Finding Connection Workshop, run by myself and my wife, Michelle, will be later this year. I think it's in June is what we decided. You can go to our website, or you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. All questions, copies of slides, suggestions, please email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. You can also sign up for our programming there. My next webinar, my next podcast, will be on experiential therapies. That's going to be next Wednesday, March 5th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Look forward to that. I hope this has been a helpful, understandable point of contact. I hope you have some experience with this work, and that what I'm talking about tonight can help you expand on that. And as always, and maybe tonight more than ever, for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up to these broadcasts. Thanks for listening, because you doing your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.